Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me recognize the Honorable Prime Minister and your cabinet. It is good that when we have it at this level, that members of cabinet could come down and dialogue at this level. I think it is a commendable effort. But I want to recognize quickly a few individuals in the audience. I see Miss Hannah Clarendon here. Good morning, good day, madam. Mr. Colin Bully and Mr. Errol Harris. These individuals, when I came into the agricultural sector, molded me and made me the kind of work I am today. And of course, I want to recognize Mr. Barton Clark out of Cadiz, Barbados. Good to have you here present with us. Today, I'm asked to look at the root crop and vegetable subsectors. And as I was walking up here, somebody told me I must redeem the time. Put it this way. Root crops and vegetables are two sleeping giants. Banana was also a sleeping giant. And I said this against the background that although we had bananas for several years after the plantation crops like coffee and cocoa, when Dr. Kuma came from India about 4 years ago to Dominica, he was amazed that we had not explored the bananas, although it was in a depleting state. So now we look at the root crops and vegetables, and the mistakes that we made in bananas, we would like to improve where root crops and vegetables are concerned. Let's take a quick look of the overview of root crops. Very, very quick as I try to redeem the time. Main root crops in Dominica are grown: yams, dashin, tanya, cassava, ginger. They're grown under rain-fed conditions. As we see a depletion of the banana and plantain sector, there's now a shift from banana and plantain production into root crop production. There's a growing interest among farmers in root crops, particularly in white potatoes. Disease problem exists in tanias and even dashin today. We have the ghost spot in dashin and dashin mosaic virus. Dashin was one of the easy crops to grow, but even that has its challenges. In terms of market, the main market are the hucksters, which purchase at least 75% of the production. There are a large number of farmers who are involved in root crop production in the agricultural region. The agricultural region, there are 7 agricultural regions in Dominica, and all these agricultural regions, there's something about them that they are very conducive to the production of root crops. There might be 1 or 2 variation and differences, such as root crop type. For example, you know, traditionally root crops, like such as yam, is grown in Penville, so no one can beat Penville when it comes to yam production. In terms of a SWOT analysis, we need to look at that very carefully in our aim to move forward on root crop production. SWOT analysis. Okay, I think it has proven export history. Root crops have a proven export history. Existing demand locally and regionally, there's an existing demand. Favorable growing conditions, as I just pointed out there. Year-round production, as we know about that. There is a resilient farming population. And that is so true when you look at the devastation from year to year, Erica and the storms and hurricanes before, the way farmers get back into that and get back into the production, that is very commendable. There's a committed extension staff, and I must put this forward because of what I'm hearing. And I'll tell you a little about that later on. And government support is in place. And giving you a quick example is the support of the Support to Horticulture project. The weaknesses, however, is that there is no umbrella organization existing for root crop production as we compare to bananas. There's inconsistent supply because of climate change, climate variability, farmers' attitude, etc. There's variation in price structure, low low adoption and adaptation of technology. I will take the threats first and then we look at the opportunities because I really want you to focus on the opportunities today. In terms of threats, pests and disease, as I mentioned, there is competition, barriers to market access, climate variability, aging farmer population, you heard it this morning, and predial larceny. Now, predial larceny sounds like a very technical, scientific term, but to put it bluntly before us are the people who steal people's crops, the voles. We're talking about the people who steal people's crop, and that's a problem. Let's go to the opportunities. There is a positive image of Dominican products. Whether you talk about root crops, grapefruit, etc., there is a positive image of the Dominican product. There is an expanding regional and international market. All right? Improved technology in production and processing, packaging and storage that's available, and consumer focus in health and well-being. You heard about the level of obesity, etc. this morning. And one of the things that we have to really do is to eat what we grow and grow what we eat. It must not just be something that we say, but something that we practice. And I have some issues with that because our children are being fed on too much macaroni and things that come from overseas. The objective of the root crop program is to satisfy local and domestic demands, and that will deal with food security. My friend from Jamaica would talk about food sovereignty, but for food security, food sovereignty. 2, the production of a quality product that meets external market demands. Foreign exchange is key. At the end of the exercise, what we're talking about is dollars and cents. Farmers need to make money from the effort. And number 3, employment creation, particularly in the rural communities. That is also important. Once upon a time, 60% of Dominica's rural population was employed through agricultural activities. But I want you to pay attention to this slide. Where we are now in root crop production, and I want you to go home with this point, where we are now. As we look at all the root crops listed here, in terms of current annual production and required annual production, you can see where we are in terms of the dashing, 800 acres. But what we really require to meet the demands, domestic and market, we need 1,100 acres. Yam, 600 acres, but we actually need 800 acres. Tanias, we have 200 acres grown annually, but you need 500 acres. Sweet potatoes, 150 acres, you need 200 acres. Now you see I have some question mark here. Wherever you see a question mark in this slide is because it is a work in development. Ginger, there's some good progress where ginger production is concerned. We have 85 acres, some of that mainly concentrated in the north, the northeast, and the south agricultural region. And white potato is becoming a serious champion in Dominica where that is concerned. Just recently, Mr. Permanent Secretary, you would know that the Ministry of Agriculture entered into an arrangement with Propel, and we're receiving some $50,000 to assist to purchase elite seeds for the production of white potatoes. When we say elite seeds, compared to the seeds that we used to get before, elite seeds will be seeds of a higher quality, and we will get a higher germination rate from that. In terms of intervention, it's important that we focus on intervention. And intervention is directly the work of extension. What are we doing to move and improve the sector? Number 1, technical and input support. And of course, when we talk about technical and input support, provisions of appropriate inputs and tech packs. Appropriate inputs. How do we arrive at appropriate inputs? Is through the conduct of soil analysis to know the nutrient content in our soils, and then you can procure the appropriate inputs. In terms of tech packs, these are just technical packages that will be used to grow any one crop. So you don't just get up and do something. You want to do some dashing, you want to do some tanias, or extension officers are trained and they understand the package in terms of guiding the way forward. On-farm research is important. Now you see I have dashing and white potatoes here. Let's take dashing first. As I speak, there is some work going on the Lapland Agricultural Station as it relates to the establishment of a germplasm bank of dashing. There are some varieties of dashing. We've done some work with cardi on dashing, but we need to know that, particularly as we look at climate change, climate variability, we need to know which one will do best in the agroecological zone. White potatoes. I said in my introduction, it's new to Dominica, and of course, when the white potatoes was introduced in the 1970s, 1975 thereabout, but we have brought on some new varieties in the last 2 seasons. So what we had from 1975, it was a variety called Desiree, but we've now introduced El Mundo, we've introduced Spunta, we've introduced Camille and Shifting. These varieties, the reason for this is we do not want to concentrate white potato production in the south of the island. But as we look at the different agroecological zone and what is required for each variety, we are testing it around the island to see which one performs better where, so we would know how the other agricultural regions come in. Okay, so that's the reason behind white potatoes here. Farmer training is important to us. We have climate change, climate smart agriculture. Mr. Whitnell, we just said it. We cannot practice agriculture that the way we did it in the past. I want to point out here this morning that agriculture is a science. It is a science and not just another thing. So, you know, weather conditions are erratic. We need now to develop programs and train our farmers in that direction. And having said that, we collaborated, I should say, with the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, in terms of putting some DRM plots. DRM, disaster risk mitigation, around the country as it relates to climate change. Good agricultural practices, that's something that you hear us talk about and practice on the farms. Farm management to include record keeping, and let me say here, farm management and record keeping, these things go hand in hand. How do farmers make decisions? What are they going to do? How do you determine the price of a crop and how to sell a pound of yam or a pound of dashing? Record keeping is very important, and we are training farmers to do that. In terms of plant multiplication, rapid multiplication of planting material. When we had the drought in 1994, and in the Penville area, you know, it's very prolific for yam production, and we lost all our planting material. We had rapid multiplication, and Mr. Godfrey Etienne, he can tell you that is the way he got back into productivity of yams. Harvesting and post-harvest technology, and then these interventions and technologies, they are not an end in themselves, but they are means to an end. So the final point I have there is expansion, right? This slide you see here is work of extension in terms of a yam demonstration plot and looking at the trellis system. Now we're talking about climate change, climate variability, but you know, with farmers going out there and cutting a lot of sticks, cutting a lot of stuff, you know, what happens, that causes deforestation. So we came up with a new system, looking at trellis system, and this here is tied up with plant multiplication in terms of what you're doing. Next slide. Here you go. As a result of our intervention of white potatoes. Now, some of you will believe that this picture comes from Holland or Canada. That's not so. This photograph came from Belleville. This is the work of the farmers in Belleville, and that's some of the potato tubers that we got as a result of our intervention. All right, now this one I want you to pay attention to it. In terms of the horticultural project, what are we doing with horticulture? The horticultural project is essentially to get our farmers to commercial production. That is the objective of the horticultural project. Now I want you to look at my graph here. This graph here says the support received from 5 years ago. From 2010 to 2015, we have been supporting our farmers. And you see, when we support our farmers with the little inputs, Mr. Chairman, you see there's an up in production. If 2014, 2015 is where it is because the year is still in progress, but we have had some challenges why it is so. There are other variables to this, but we don't have time to go into this. Next slide, please. Okay, post-Erica storm, post-tropical Erica initiative. What have we done? There's a horticultural project that concentrates on commercial farmers. But at the same time, we understand that Erica, when she passed, she was not selective. She touched everybody in her path. So we now review the objectives of the horticultural project to consider farmers at all levels: commercial farmers, subsistence farmers, semi-commercial farmers. And the PS, he alluded to it earlier on, or the minister, but in terms of assistance to farmers, we are now in the process of giving the farmers 4,000 bags of fertilizer. So 981 root crop farmers will benefit from this initiative. Go ahead. Now, vegetables very quickly. Overview of vegetables. We have two systems of production. One system of production is the greenhouse subsector and open field subsector. Now, with the greenhouse subsector, that was introduced into Dominica in the 1980s. But currently on island, we have 210 structures, 120 farmers involved in that, and it is in the west and the south region, that is where you find more greenhouses. In terms of the percentage of greenhouses under production, 60%, so we still have an opportunity there in terms of greenhouse production. The main crops are tomatoes, please go back, please. Tomatoes, sweet pepper, lettuce, cucumber, celery. What we see here is Mr. Trevor Douglas, and in that photograph, we had a problem with tomatoes in Dominica, but farmers could not grow tomatoes at all because we had a bacterial problem, a fungal problem because of direct connection to the soil. Again, you have research going on in extension where we move from planting directly on the soil into pot culture, and that is now successful tomato production in Syndicate on the farm of Richmond Shillingford. We have other farmers also doing the same thing. Next slide, please. Okay, in terms of challenges associated with greenhouses, loss of plastic, pest and disease, lack of organization, slow adaptation of technology, appropriate technology, design and inputs. Design and input is that some of the greenhouses that we have is not for the tropical conditions. So we have to revisit what we have in terms of improvement. Management option for greenhouses is reinforced plastic, pot culture, as I just told you, a steering committee to look at this, which is the Greenhouse Farm Association we're talking about there, introduction of new varieties, tropical design, training of farmers in greenhouse technology. Synopsis of open field production. What is open field production? Is growing it in the open. A traditional system of production that is widely practiced. It's dependent on rainfall. Factors that influence such production is topography, socioeconomic factors, weather patterns, farmer attitude. Next slide. Objective of the open field production is to ensure constant supply of vegetable to meet local demand, to train farmers in cost-reducing techniques, to assist farmers to reduce the use of pesticides. And that is very critical in terms as we look at the environment, and to promote value added. All right. Now, one person asked me a very serious question. I want the figures to answer this. Somebody asked me, how will I convince somebody to go into root crop production? Speech is not enough, but the practicality will help you. Now, I'm working with some farmers, and I've worked with some farmers, and I'm not at liberty to break confidentiality, but in terms of root crops, cost of production for 1 acre of dashing, $8,000. Yield, 12,000 pounds. Take the liberty and do the maths. Multiply that by $1.50 as it goes now. Tanya, you spend $10,000 to do 1 acre, 15,000 pounds as yield. Do the maths. And yams as being the champion, $15,000, you can get 30,000 pounds. Do the maths. With this, it will bring dollars in the farmer's pocket. There's an opportunity in root crop production. Now let's quickly on the way forward for vegetables, root crops, etc. An umbrella organization drawing from the banana model. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't afford to miss what happened in bananas. And so in the banana model, you find there was a system in place where farmers would get certain things regularly to do what they have to do in terms of crop development. A functional pack house, functional pack houses, and I think that's forthcoming. You'll hear a little more about that. Research and development. We see Mr. Barton Clark here today, and you know the work that we've done in Tanyas. We still have to do that. In terms of research, agriculture cannot stand on its own. There has to be research and development. And notice I add research and development because it cannot only be researched. After it has been researched, it has to be implemented to develop. That's why this presentation is talking about crop development and not only crop production. When we talk about development, more items are involved in development. Introduction and adoption of new technology and market-led production. Market information. The farmers, they did it in the banana industry because the market drove them to do it. Market-led production, market-driven. Now we have collaboration between ministries. And Mr. Permanent Secretary, Mr. Chairman, this is important to me. There has to be greater collaboration between ministries. And we are starting today. As we look at that, we must understand something. In the past, I know it was Ministry of Agriculture and Trade, but Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, you know it's agriculture, but all of them must come together to collaborate. When an extension officer goes out there and he convinces the farmers to produce crop A, he will give the market information, but if something happens and the crop does not sell, he takes the blows. I am saying that Ministry of Trade must come on board and collaborate effectively so that when we speak about a value chain, everyone in that chain must play his or her part. All right? This one, predial larceny. And I've said this. There has to be something in place for predial larceny. Ladies and gentlemen, there are too many farmers who get involved in crop production and they do not get the time to harvest it. We have to address this because if we do all what we do, the government put its support, extension put its support, you cannot harvest your crop and that is a deterrent. Let us understand the issue of predial larceny has to be addressed. Mr. Permanent Secretary, they have a good model in St. Lucia in terms of how they do it. When they catch you today, the case is called tomorrow, and they do what they have to do. And I am standing for that. Okay, I believe together we can do it. Together as a people, we can do it. There is hope for the sector in Dominica. There is hope for agriculture. There is hope for root crops and vegetables. And I want to leave this with you from the prophet Hosea. He says, sow to yourselves in righteousness, reap in mercy, break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord, till he come and rain righteousness over you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I am asked to make a statement on passion fruits and citrus. Let's start with citrus. Over the years, the Ministry of Agriculture have put in a lot of effort into citrus production. If you visit the gardens, you will see some greenhouses at the back that deals with citrus certification. So citrus certification, when we give you a plant out there, it is a certified plant. For this year in the extension program, we're looking to do 150 acres of the different citrus varieties, okay? But again, as I emphasized when I spoke about root crops, you just cannot do it as you did it before. In terms of passion fruit, that's a crop with good potential. It is on the rise. The North is leading on that. There is a variety, the hybrid variety, it sells very, very well. We have tech packs for these crops, and I believe when we look at citrus, we look at root crops, we look at all the crops, there is a hope for the agricultural sector in Dominica. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.